The same day I lost my dream job, my husband threw me out of our home with nothing but one small bag. My mother-in-law smiled as the door closed behind me and said I'd never recover without their family. Homeless, heartbroken, and standing in the middle of a storm, I made one decision that changed my life forever. I gave my last bit of warmth to a complete stranger, never imagining she was about to become the reason the people who betrayed me would regret everything. Before we begin, if you enjoy emotional stories filled with unforgettable twists, inspiring comebacks, and powerful life lessons, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another story. Now let me tell you how losing everything became the greatest blessing of my life. By the time my husband locked me out of our house, the rain was coming down so hard it felt personal. I stood on the front porch with one travel bag in my hand, no job, no home, and no idea where I was supposed to go next. Behind me, the door clicked shut softly, like it had been waiting all evening to erase me. That was the sound that broke me. Not the shouting, not the betrayal, not even the woman I had seen touching my husband's arm like she already knew my side of the bed was empty. It was that quiet click. But to understand how I ended up standing in a storm with my whole life packed into one small bag, I have to start that morning. My name is Simone Carter, and until that Tuesday, I thought I was building a life I could be proud of. I was a senior project director at Greystone Community Partners in Atlanta, a Black-owned urban development firm known for rebuilding forgotten neighborhoods. For 7 years, I gave that company everything. Early mornings, late nights, missed birthdays, canceled trips. I told myself the sacrifice mattered because the work mattered. My biggest project was called the Magnolia Grove Initiative. It was supposed to bring affordable townhomes, small business grants, a youth center, and a community clinic to one of Atlanta's oldest Black neighborhoods. I had spent 6 months fighting for that plan. That morning, I walked into the office ready to finalize my presentation. By noon, Human Resources called me upstairs. The moment I entered the conference room, I knew. 2 executives sat across from me with careful faces and a white envelope on the table. Nobody ever sets an envelope in front of you like that unless something is ending. Simone, Mr. Whitaker from HR said, the board has approved a full restructuring. My stomach tightened. Our community development division is being dissolved, effective immediately. I stared at him. The whole division? He nodded. This is not performance related. Your work has been exceptional. Exceptional. That word felt almost cruel. They gave me severance paperwork, a recommendation letter, and 20 minutes to clear my office. 7 years fit inside one cardboard box. A framed certificate, my coffee mug, a photo of my parents, my notebook full of project ideas. That was it. As I walked toward the elevator, my best friend, Danielle, rushed from her office and grabbed me in a hug. They're fools, she whispered. I laughed because if I didn't, I might cry. Call me tonight, she said. No matter how late. I will. But I didn't. I drove home first. The sky was already dark when I left the parking garage. Rain clouds gathered over Atlanta like something waiting to fall apart. At a red light, I called my husband, Marcus. He answered on the 4th ring. Hey, I lost my job, I said. Silence. Not shock. Not concern. Just space. Finally, he said. I'm sorry to hear that. I waited for more. Nothing came. I'm coming home, I said. We have people over tonight. I frowned. People. My mother arranged dinner. I thought I told you. He hadn't. Before I could ask anything else, he said, just get here, and hung up. When I pulled into our neighborhood, luxury cars lined both sides of the street. Our house glowed with warm lights, music and laughter. Caterers moved through the front door carrying silver trays. I sat in my car for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. My career had ended that morning. My husband was hosting a celebration that night. Inside, everything smelled like roses, expensive perfume, and catered food. My mother-in-law, Vanessa Carter, appeared near the foyer in a cream silk dress, smiling like she had been expecting a guest, not the woman who lived there. There you are, Simone, she said. We weren't sure you'd arrive so early. I live here. Her smile stayed fixed. Of course. Across the room, Marcus stood surrounded by attorneys and investors. When he saw me, he lifted one finger. 1 minute. Then he turned back to his conversation. 6 years of marriage, and I got one finger. I moved through the room in a daze until someone congratulated me. You must be so proud of Marcus, a man said. Equity partner before 42. That's impressive. I smiled because my face knew what to do even when my heart didn't. Equity partner. My husband had received the biggest promotion of his career and never told me. Then I saw her. Adrian Wells. I didn't know her name yet, but I knew what I saw. A beautiful black woman in a dark green dress, standing too close to my husband, laughing too softly at something he said. When she touched his arm, it wasn't accidental. Vanessa appeared beside me. Simone, this is Adrian. She works closely with Marcus. Adrian extended her hand. It's nice to finally meet you. Finally. I shook her hand. Marcus has never mentioned you. Her smile faltered for half a second. That half second told me enough. Later, after the guests toasted Marcus and Vanessa lifted her glass to new beginnings, my husband finally said, "We need to talk." He led me upstairs to his office and locked the door behind us. Then, he placed a thick folder on the desk. Inside were trust documents, property transfers, financial agreements, and my signature on page after page. I looked up slowly. What is this? Marcus folded his hands. 18 months ago, you signed paperwork transferring our major assets into a family trust. I couldn't breathe. The house. The trust owns it. Our savings. The trust. The lake property. The trust. Who controls the trust? The office door opened before he could answer. Vanessa walked in without knocking. I do, she said calmly. That was when I understood. They had not betrayed me in a moment of anger. They had planned it. Quietly. Carefully. For months. Marcus slid an envelope toward me. There's money inside. Enough to help you get settled. I pushed it back. I don't want guilt dressed up as generosity. His jaw tightened. You have 30 minutes to pack. So I did. I took my mother's Bible, my father's watch, my laptop, 3 outfits, and the journal I had kept since college. Everything else stayed behind. When I came downstairs, Vanessa stood by the door. I hope you land on your feet, she said. I looked at her, then at Marcus. I hope one day you both meet yourselves clearly. Then I stepped into the storm. Behind me, the door closed. Softly. Completely. And with one bag in my hand, I walked into the rain, not knowing that the worst night of my life was about to lead me to the woman who would change everything. The rain swallowed me almost immediately. Within seconds my hair was soaked, my sweater clung to my skin, and the small travel bag over my shoulder felt twice as heavy. I had no umbrella, no destination, and no plan beyond putting one foot in front of the other. Funny how quickly life can humble you. Just 12 hours earlier I had been worrying about a board presentation. Now I was wondering where I would sleep. I walked for what felt like forever, barely noticing where I was going. Every now and then a car sped past, sending water splashing onto the sidewalk. Through the windows of the homes I passed, I saw families eating dinner, children laughing, couples curled up on couches watching television. The ordinary life I had believed was mine was continuing everywhere except for me. My phone buzzed. Danielle. I answered before it could ring a second time. Simone. Thank God. Where are you? I honestly don't know. What do you mean you don't know? I've just been walking. Her voice became firmer. Marcus called the office looking for you. That stopped me. He did. He told everyone you left after an emotional argument and that you needed time to yourself. I closed my eyes. He said that. He made it sound like this was your decision. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. Of course he did. Marcus Brooks never entered a room without controlling the story first. Listen to me, Danielle continued. Come to my place tonight. I can't. Why not? I need to clear my head. You don't have to do this alone. I looked down at my phone. 5% battery. I'll call you tomorrow. Promise me. I promise. The call ended. Seconds later my phone died completely. Now I truly was alone. The rain continued falling without mercy. About 20 minutes later, I noticed an old church sitting at the corner of 2 quiet streets. The building had clearly been abandoned years ago, but the stone entrance still provided shelter from the storm. I climbed the steps and finally sat down. The silence hit me all at once. For the first time since that morning, no one expected anything from me. No emails. No meetings. No pretending. Just silence. I rested my elbows on my knees and cried. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just enough to let the weight of the day leave my chest. After several minutes I looked up and noticed words carved into the stone above the entrance. Faith survives the storm. I stared at those words until another sound pulled my attention away. Footsteps. Slow. Uneven. Dragging slightly against the wet pavement. An elderly black woman emerged from the darkness carrying nothing. Her silver curls were soaked by the rain, and she wore a faded gray sweater that offered almost no protection from the cold. What caught my attention most were her feet. She wasn't wearing any shoes. She stopped a respectful distance away and smiled warmly. Good evening, sweetheart. Her voice was gentle. Would you happen to know if there's an emergency shelter nearby? I looked at her trembling hands. I'm sorry. I shook my head. I don't. She nodded as though she'd expected that answer. Thank you anyway. She turned to leave. Another blast of freezing wind swept through the church entrance. She shivered so hard I could hear her teeth chatter. Without thinking, I stood. Ma'am. She looked back. You need this more than I do. I slipped off my raincoat and walked over to her. Oh no, she protested. I couldn't possibly. You can. But what about you? I smiled faintly. I've already lost everything else today. I don't want you losing this too. My grandmother always told me something. I carefully placed the coat around her shoulders. If God puts someone in front of you who needs help, don't spend so much time counting what it'll cost you that you miss the chance to be a blessing. The woman looked at me for a long moment. There was something unusual about the way she studied my face. Not curiosity, recognition, almost as if she were memorizing me. What happened today? She asked softly. I don't know why I answered. Maybe because she wasn't trying to judge me. Maybe because strangers sometimes listen better than family. I lost my job. She nodded. My husband ended our marriage. Another nod. My mother-in-law helped him take everything. She reached out and gently squeezed my hand. I'm so sorry. Those 3 words meant more coming from her than they had from anyone else all day. I'll survive. She smiled. I believe you will. I reached into my travel bag. Inside was the sandwich I bought that morning for lunch. It was the only food I had. I hadn't eaten a bite all day. I looked at it, then at her. Here. I handed her the paper bag. You should eat. Her eyes widened. No, sweetheart. I insist. What about you? I'll find breakfast tomorrow. For a moment I thought she might cry. Instead, she carefully accepted the sandwich with both hands. I've met many wealthy people in my lifetime. She looked directly into my eyes. But very few generous ones. I laughed softly. I'm definitely not wealthy. No. She smiled. But generosity has never depended on a bank account. We stood there listening to the rain. Finally she asked, What's your name? Simone. She repeated it quietly. Simone. As though it mattered. My name is Evelyn. It was nice meeting you. The pleasure was entirely mine. She adjusted the raincoat around her shoulders. Then she disappeared into the storm. I watched until she was completely gone. The cold hit me almost immediately. Without my coat, the night air felt brutal. Still, I didn't regret giving it away. Not even a little. About 10 minutes later, a low hum echoed through the empty street. At first I thought it was distant thunder. Then, headlights appeared around the corner. One SUV. Then another. Then another. 6 identical black Cadillac Escalades rolled slowly toward the church in perfect formation before stopping directly in front of the steps. Every engine shut off at exactly the same time. 4 sharply dressed security officers stepped out first, scanning the area with practiced precision. Then the rear door of the center SUV opened. My breath caught. A familiar pair of polished heels touched the pavement. The elderly woman I'd just given my coat to stepped out wearing an elegant navy cashmere overcoat. Diamond earrings sparkled beneath the streetlights. A chauffeur held an umbrella over her head while another man respectfully opened the path before her. She walked toward me with the same warm smile she'd worn only minutes earlier. Except now, there was unmistakable power in every step. I stared at her, completely speechless. She stopped in front of me. Good evening again, Simone. I don't understand. She smiled. I imagine not. The gentleman beside her spoke respectfully. Allow me to introduce Ms. Evelyn Walker, founder and chairwoman of the Walker Hope Foundation. My heart skipped. The Walker Hope Foundation, one of the largest charitable organizations in America. Everyone knew that name. I looked back at Evelyn. You were testing me? She shook her head gently. No. Then she said the words that would change my life forever. I was searching. She extended her hand toward me, and after 23 years, her smile grew a little brighter. I believe I've finally found the person I've been looking for. For several seconds, I couldn't move. I simply stood there staring at Evelyn Walker while rain poured around us. This couldn't be real. 20 minutes earlier, she'd been standing barefoot in the cold wearing my raincoat. Now 6 luxury SUVs, professional security, and a chauffeur were waiting for her like she was the President of the United States. I don't understand, I whispered. Evelyn smiled kindly. I know. She stepped closer, dismissing the umbrella someone tried to hold over her. The rain dampened the shoulders of her expensive coat, but she didn't seem to care. I owe you an explanation. I nodded slowly. I think you do. She glanced toward the church steps. Would you mind sitting for a few minutes? There are some things I'd rather explain before we leave. Before we leave. The words caught my attention immediately. Leave where? I followed her back beneath the church entrance. One of her security officers quietly placed 2 folding chairs under the overhang before stepping away again. Everything happened so smoothly that it was obvious this wasn't the first time they'd done something like this. Evelyn noticed me watching them. They've worked with me for years. They knew you were here. They knew where I was. I frowned. So, none of this was an accident. She smiled. The meeting was. The security wasn't. I looked at her, waiting. Finally, she folded her hands in her lap. 23 years ago, after my husband passed away, I inherited more wealth than one person could reasonably spend in 3 lifetimes. I recognized her name from magazines and news stories. The Walker Hope Foundation funded schools, hospitals, scholarships, and housing projects all across the country. But I had never actually heard her tell her own story. For the first few years, she continued, I wrote checks. She laughed softly. I thought money alone solved problems. It doesn't. It solves some. She looked out into the rain. But it doesn't tell you who people really are. I stayed quiet. One winter evening, many years ago, I found myself stranded after a car accident. She smiled at the memory. I looked like any other elderly woman needing help. What happened? More than 30 people walked past me. I frowned. They ignored you. They noticed me. She looked directly into my eyes. They simply decided I wasn't worth stopping for. Something tightened in my chest. The 31st person stopped. What did they do? They gave me their only blanket. I blinked. They didn't know who you were. No. They just helped. Exactly. She nodded. I never forgot that. The rain continued falling around us. So every year, she smiled, I spend one night walking through a different city. I stared at her. Alone. My security team watches from a distance. She pointed discreetly toward one of the SUVs. They intervene only if I'm in danger. And tonight, they watched you. My heart skipped. They saw everything. They saw a woman who had clearly been crying. She smiled gently. They saw you remove your own coat while you were shivering. I looked down. They saw you give away your only meal. A lump formed in my throat. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I know. Her answer came immediately. That's exactly why it mattered. Neither of us spoke for several moments. Finally, I asked the question that had been bothering me. Why were you searching? Her expression changed. For the first time that evening, she looked tired. Not physically. Emotionally. I'm 78 years old. She smiled sadly. I've spent decades building something bigger than myself. The foundation. She nodded. It serves thousands of families every year. But I have no children. I listened carefully. And I no longer trust my board. That surprised me. They're intelligent people. She sighed. They're also increasingly interested in protecting money instead of protecting people. She looked back at me. I need someone who remembers why the foundation exists. I laughed nervously. Evelyn, I lost my job this morning. I know. My husband threw me out tonight. I know. I don't even have a place to sleep. She smiled, which means your compassion wasn't motivated by comfort. I looked away. I don't understand why you're telling me all this. Because I'd like to offer you something. What? A chance. She reached into her handbag and removed a cream-colored envelope. Not thick, not dramatic, just simple. Inside was a business card. Beneath it was a single key. What is this? My guest house. I looked up. You own a guest house. She laughed. I own several. I can't accept this. You haven't heard the full offer. I waited. I'd like you to stay on my estate for a while. I nearly dropped the envelope. What? You need time. She spoke as calmly as though discussing tomorrow's weather. Time to grieve. Time to think. Time to heal. I couldn't possibly. You could. She interrupted me gently. And I hope you will. I stared at her. You don't even know me. I know enough. She smiled. I know what people become when no one is watching. I felt tears filling my eyes again. No one had believed in me all day. Not my employer. Not my husband. Not even myself. Yet this extraordinary woman was offering me a future because of one simple act of kindness. There is one condition, she continued. I swallowed. What is it? You allow yourself to dream again. I laughed through my tears. I don't even know what tomorrow looks like. No. She smiled. But I do. At that moment, another woman stepped out of one of the SUVs. She was in her early 50s, impeccably dressed, with silver-framed glasses, and an air of effortless confidence. She approached Evelyn respectfully. Ma'am, everything is ready. Evelyn nodded. Then she turned to me. Simone, I'd like you to meet Patricia Grant. Patricia extended her hand. It's a pleasure. I shook it. Patricia has been my chief of staff for 18 years. Patricia smiled warmly. And I've never seen Ms. Walker invite someone home on the first night. I looked between them. What does that mean? Patricia's smile grew. It means... She glanced at Evelyn before finishing. She sees something very special in you. I looked back at Evelyn. What exactly do you see? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached into the pocket of her overcoat. When her hand came back out, she was holding my raincoat, neatly folded, still damp from the storm. She placed it carefully into my hands. I see a woman. Her voice softened, who had every reason to become bitter tonight. She gently closed my fingers around the coat, and chose kindness instead. She stepped toward the waiting SUV, and opened the rear door herself. Then she looked back at me. Come home with me, Simone. I looked at the church, then at the empty street, then at the bag containing everything I still owned. Only 12 hours earlier I had believed my life was over. Standing there in the rain, for the very first time, I wondered if perhaps it was only just beginning. I had spent the last 6 hours watching everything I loved fall apart. My career was gone. My marriage was over. The home I had poured my heart into no longer belonged to me. So when Evelyn Walker held open the door of her SUV and quietly said, "Come home with me," every instinct told me to say no. Not because I didn't need help, because I'd spent the last 6 years learning what happens when you trust the wrong people. Evelyn seemed to read my thoughts. You don't have to decide your future tonight, she said gently. I'm only asking you to accept a safe place to sleep. I looked down at the overnight bag in my hand. Everything I owned fit inside it. There really wasn't anything left to protect except my pride. And pride had never kept anyone warm. I nodded. I'll come. For the first time that night, Evelyn smiled with genuine relief. I'm very glad. One of the security officers opened the rear passenger door, and I climbed inside. The leather seats were warmer than anything I'd touched all evening. As the convoy pulled away from the abandoned church, I looked back through the rain-covered window. Just an hour earlier, I had believed those church steps would become the place where my life ended. Instead, they had become the place where it quietly began again. No one spoke during the drive. The windshield wipers moved steadily across the glass, while the city lights slowly disappeared behind us. About 30 minutes later, enormous wrought iron gates appeared ahead. They opened automatically. Beyond them stretched a tree-lined driveway that curved through acres of beautifully landscaped grounds. I had never seen anything like it. At the end of the drive stood a magnificent estate surrounded by towering oak trees. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't designed to impress. It carried the quiet confidence of something built to last. The front door opened before the SUV stopped. A middle-aged black gentleman wearing a dark suit stepped onto the porch. "Welcome home, Ms. Walker." Then he smiled at me. "And welcome to you as well, Miss Carter." I looked at Evelyn. "They already know my name?" She chuckled. "My staff is very efficient." Inside, the house felt warm in every sense of the word. A fire burned inside a massive stone fireplace. Fresh flowers decorated the entryway. Soft jazz played somewhere in the background. It didn't feel like a mansion. It felt like peace. Patricia handed me a folded set of comfortable clothes. "I thought you might appreciate something dry." I looked down. Sweatpants. A sweatshirt. Warm socks. Simple. Comfortable. Somehow, that kindness almost made me cry again. "Thank you. Your room is upstairs whenever you're ready." After changing into the dry clothes, I stood in the guest bedroom staring out the window. Rain still covered the gardens below. Everything that had happened that day finally settled over me. I sat on the edge of the bed. Then, without warning, I cried harder than I had all night. Not because I was sad anymore. Because I was safe. Sometimes safety feels so unfamiliar that your heart doesn't know what to do with it. A gentle knock interrupted my thoughts. "Come in." Evelyn stepped inside, carrying 2 mugs of hot tea. "I thought you might still be awake. I don't think I'll sleep much tonight." She handed me one of the mugs before sitting in the chair across from the bed. For several moments, we simply drank in silence. Finally, she asked, "Would you like to tell me about your husband?" I laughed quietly. "I don't even know where to start." "Start with the man you fell in love with." That surprised me. Not the man who betrayed me. The man I'd loved. I smiled despite myself. "Marcus wasn't always the man you met tonight." "No. We met at a community fundraiser." I laughed softly at the memory. "He accidentally spilled sweet tea all over my dress." Evelyn smiled. "And he was so embarrassed that he bought me another dress from the boutique next door." She laughed. "That's certainly one way to apologize. He was thoughtful back then." I looked into my tea. He remembered birthdays. He called just to hear my voice. He made me believe I was the most important woman in the world. What changed? I thought about it carefully. It wasn't sudden. It rarely is. Success changed him. I sighed. Or maybe success just revealed who he'd always been. Evelyn nodded thoughtfully. "Money doesn't change character." She took another sip of tea. "It magnifies it." That sentence stayed with me. Because it was true. Marcus hadn't become selfish overnight. The signs had been there. Long work hours. Conversations that became shorter. Vacations canceled because another client was more important. I had explained away every warning sign because I loved him. Love can make intelligent people ignore obvious truths. I keep asking myself what I missed. Evelyn leaned forward. "May I tell you something I learned many years ago?" "Please." "When someone spends years pretending to be someone they aren't." She smiled gently. "Their deception isn't proof that you're foolish." I looked at her. "It's proof that they practiced." I felt something inside me loosen. For the first time since leaving my house, I stopped blaming myself. Evelyn stood. "You should get some rest." She walked toward the door, then paused. "Oh." She turned back around. "I almost forgot." "What?" "I asked my attorneys to begin looking into the documents your husband had you sign." I blinked. "You did?" She nodded. "From what you've described, I believe there may be more to the story." My heart started beating faster. "You think what they did wasn't legal?" "I think." She smiled carefully. "Your husband was very confident." She rested one hand on the doorknob. "And in my experience," a knowing look crossed her face, "overconfidence has ruined far more powerful people than honesty ever has." After she left, I sat quietly in the dimly lit room. Outside, the storm was finally beginning to fade. For the first time in nearly 24 hours, I felt something I hadn't believed I'd ever feel again. Hope. Little did I know, while I was lying down in a warm bed for the first time that night, Marcus Brooks was sitting in my empty house, convinced he had won. He had no idea that by forcing me out his front door, he had unknowingly walked me straight into the life I was always meant to have. And within 48 hours, his carefully built world would begin collapsing one secret at a time. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. For a few seconds, I forgot where I was. The room was quiet. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows, replacing the storm that had raged outside only hours earlier. Then everything came rushing back. My job, my marriage, the trust documents, Marcus. Vanessa. I sat up slowly, expecting the familiar ache in my chest. It was still there, but it no longer felt like it was crushing me. Someone knocked gently. Come in. Patricia entered carrying a breakfast tray. Ms. Walker is waiting for you in the library whenever you're ready. I followed her downstairs a few minutes later. Evelyn stood beside a wall of books, speaking with two sharply dressed attorneys. When she saw me, she smiled. Good morning, Simone. Good morning. She introduced the attorneys. This is James Holloway and Monique Ellis. They're among the best asset litigation attorneys in the country. James shook my hand. We spent most of the night reviewing the information Ms. Walker shared with us. I frowned. Already? Monique smiled. We don't like wasting time. She opened a leather folder. Your husband is good. I wasn't sure whether to be offended. But, she smiled wider. He made one mistake. My heart skipped. What kind of mistake? He assumed you'd never ask questions. James slid several documents across the table. The trust wasn't funded with only marital assets. I looked down. I don't understand. Your inheritance. I froze. My father's investment account. He nodded. According to these records, those funds were transferred into the trust without your informed consent. I stared at him. My father left that money to me. Exactly. Monique folded her hands. In Georgia, inherited assets generally remain separate property unless they're knowingly converted. My pulse quickened. He wasn't allowed to take that. No. James smiled. And that's only the beginning. Over the next hour, they uncovered one surprise after another. Marcus had moved money between accounts without properly documenting the transfers. He had used marital funds to improve properties titled solely under the trust. Several signatures required additional disclosures that I had never received. None of it guaranteed victory, but it gave us something far more important. A case. When the meeting ended, Evelyn looked at me. You have a decision to make. I already knew what she meant. I could walk away. You could. I could let them keep everything. You could. She paused. But would you be able to live with that? I thought about my parents. They had worked 2 jobs most of my childhood. Every sacrifice they made had been to give me opportunities they never had. Walking away wouldn't be forgiveness. It would be surrender. I looked at the attorneys. I want to fight. Evelyn smiled. I hoped you'd say that. News travels quickly in Atlanta. Within a week, Marcus received divorce papers. 3 days later, he was served with notice that several financial transactions connected to the family trust were being challenged in court. According to James, Marcus's confidence disappeared almost immediately. The man who had spoken with such certainty in his home office suddenly wanted to negotiate. He called me 12 times. I didn't answer. He sent emails. I didn't reply. Then, one Saturday afternoon, Patricia walked into my office carrying a visitor card. Marcus Brooks is at the front gate. I looked up from my paperwork. He wants to speak with you. I sat quietly for several seconds. Then I nodded. I'll meet him. Not because I wanted answers. I already had those. I wanted closure. Marcus stood beside the fountain near the entrance. He looked exhausted. The expensive suits were still there. The confidence wasn't. When he saw me, he managed a weak smile. You look different. I feel different. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Finally he sighed. I made mistakes. I waited. I handled everything badly. I continued waiting. He shifted uncomfortably. I thought we'd eventually reach a settlement. There it is. He frowned. What? The real reason you came. He looked away. The attorneys say the trust may not hold. I nodded. I know. They're freezing accounts. I know. The media has started asking questions. I know. His shoulders slumped. I never wanted this. I almost laughed. You planned my exit for nearly 2 years. I know. You let your mother convince you I was disposable. I know. You replaced me before you asked for a divorce. His silence answered that one. Then he looked up. I'm sorry. I believed him. That surprised me. For the first time since all of this began, I actually believed he regretted what he'd done. Not because he lost me. Because he was finally living with the consequences of his choices. I forgive you. His eyes widened. You do? Yes. Hope flickered across his face. Then I finished my sentence. I forgive you. I smiled sadly. But I will never trust you again. The hope disappeared. Forgiveness wasn't reconciliation. It was freedom. Freedom for me. I turned toward the estate. Behind me, Marcus spoke one last time. Will you ever love someone again? I looked back over my shoulder. I don't know. Then I smiled. But I know one thing. What's that? I'll never love someone more than I love the woman who survived you. I walked away without looking back. 6 months later, the court ruled that significant portions of a trust had been improperly structured and that several assets, including my father's inheritance, had to be returned. Marcus's law firm quietly asked him to resign after questions surrounding his financial disclosures became public. Vanessa's influence in Atlanta's social circles disappeared almost overnight. Not because I sought revenge, because the truth eventually reached everyone. As for me, I accepted Evelyn's invitation to become part of the Walker Hope Foundation. Not as her successor. Not yet. As her student. Together we expanded affordable housing programs throughout underserved Black communities, funded scholarships for first-generation college students, and opened neighborhood business incubators across Georgia. One afternoon, almost a year after the worst night of my life, Evelyn and I stood outside the ribbon-cutting ceremony for a new community center. Families filled the playground. Children laughed. Music floated through the air. She smiled at me. Do you ever think about that night at the church? Every day. Do you regret giving away your coat? I laughed. It wasn't the coat that changed my life. What was it? I watched a little girl run into her mother's arms. The decision. What decision? I smiled. The decision not to let pain change who I was. Evelyn nodded proudly. That's why I chose you. I shook my head. No. She looked at me curiously. You didn't choose me. I looked around at the families whose lives were changing because one woman had refused to let wealth replace compassion. You simply found the woman my grandmother always believed I could become. Sometimes people think my story is about losing everything. It isn't. It's about discovering that everything I truly needed was never inside a house, never inside a marriage, never inside a job. It was already inside me. I just had to lose everything else before I could finally see it. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to like this video, share to your loved ones, and subscribe to the channel. Also turn on notifications so you never miss another inspiring story. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were in Simone's shoes? I'd love to read your thoughts. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I hope Simone's journey reminds you that losing what you thought you needed can sometimes open the door to the life you were always meant to have. Until next time, stay kind. Stay hopeful, and remember, your greatest setback may be preparing you for your greatest comeback. Take care, and I'll see you in the next story.